Welcome to the Thief House, folks. Thanks for joining me. We are on a devotion time, and this is an opportunity to listen to the Word of God. If you don't have time to pick it up and read it, you can listen to it and get some commentary in it as we're going along. We're going to be in Daniel chapter 6. Daniel is a prophecy book. He's one of the minor prophets. It's called an apocalyptic book. This is during the time that Israel and Judah were in captivity, first in Babylon. And then the Medes and the Persians defeated Babylon and took over that kingdom, and now it's the Persian kingdom. And this is during that 70 years of captivity that they were in. And Darius is king over the Medes and the Persians at this time. Now, this is going to be Daniel and the lion's den. There's going to be a word in here. This is the English Standard Version I'm reading from right now. And there's going to be a word satraps. Don't let that word throw you off. The old King James uses the word prince or prince, multiple princes, right? Um, in that place. So if satrap just means a prince or a ruler in the land. Let's begin. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps or princesses, not female princes, but male prince, to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them three high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps or prince should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps or princes because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they couldn't find no ground for complaint or any fault because he was faithful. And no error or fault was found in him. Then these men said, we shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. Then these high officials and satraps or princes came by agreement to the king and said to him, O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom and prefects and the satraps and the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforcement, an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed. According to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing stands fast, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, now, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and the Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signet and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. Then at day, then at day, I'm sorry, I was going to say then at daybreak. It reads this way. Then at break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he had trusted his God. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought, they were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwelt in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. And he who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. Read it again. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. A few things out of this passage. Number one, Daniel knew of the decree, but he still bowed before the Lord, even though he knew that there would probably be repercussions for doing that. Daniel did not fear death. He feared the Lord more than he feared death. He feared the Lord more than he feared the wrath of the king. And his heart was heavy for the people of God, and his heart was heavy for Jerusalem and for Judah and Israel. Now, the next thing is that he found no fault with God or the king, and that's important. Could Daniel have been devoured by the lions? Well, certainly, if God had found fault in him, that could have happened. Um, and that's an important statement that Daniel made, because you see, he obeyed God, so God, no fault with God. And the king didn't have any fault with Daniel because Daniel was a man who had advised the king well, a man who was good to the kingdom, a man who obeyed the king, except this one area, and the king regretted doing what he did because he had a regard for Daniel. The third thing is the throwing not only of the men who accused Daniel into the lion's pit, but also the wives and the children. That seems awful cruel. But God did not order that, the king did. God did not restrain it. God doesn't always restrain the evil of men. Um, God does restrain the evil men to some degree, and that's called the temporal grace of God. But it's always good to remember that regardless of what evil we see on this earth, and that referring to the women and the children being thrown in, when they, especially the children, had nothing to do with it. Um, we always have to remember that we are all guilty before God anyway, and that the only thing that can save us from the wrath of God against us because of our sin and evil of our hearts and our mind is the substitutionary sacrifice of Christ on the cross and the imputation of his perfect life as the second Adam and the imputation of his righteousness to us. He bore our sins. We received his righteousness when we believed on him as our Savior. So that's the three things I wanted to address in Daniel chapter 6. All right, we're going to the New Testament. We're going to be in Matthew 26 in the New Testament. Now, in the last reading of Matthew, we were in Matthew 25, and that took me an hour, a little over an hour to go through Matthew 25 because it was such an important passage when it came to Christ's prediction or his prophecy of what happened in AD 70 with the fall of the temple and the fall of Jerusalem and the scattering of the Jews throughout the Roman Empire, the Roman kingdom. And all of that was predicted in Matthew 25. And so we pick up with 26 after Christ had given that discourse to his disciples. All right. Let me get back over. I was just setting my marker in my Bible there. So this is the plot to kill Jesus. When Jesus had finished all these sayings, he said to his disciples, and all the sayings that he's talking about are his prophecy in Matthew 25 of future events that were fulfilled with the destruction of the temple in AD 70. When Jesus had finished all these things, he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified." Then the chief priest and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and plotted together in order to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him. But they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people." Now, when Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came up to him with an alabaster flask of very expensive ointment, and she poured it on his head as he reclined at table. And when the disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "Why this waste? For this could have been sold for a large sum and given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, but you will not always have me. In pouring this ointment on my body, she has done it to prepare me for burial. Truly I say to you, whoever this gospel is proclaimed, truly I say to you, wherever this gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Now, next part is Judas to betray Jesus. Then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What will you give me if I deliver him over to you?" And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he sought an opportunity to betray him. Now, it's interesting that it was 30 pieces of silver. Focus on the number three. Jesus Christ was in his death, burial, and resurrection was 3 days. That's interesting. And God is three in one. That's interesting. It was 30 pieces, specifically 30 pieces of silver. The Passover with the disciples. This is the next part. Now, on the first day of of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying, "Where will you have us prepare for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, 'The teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples.'" And the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. When it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12. Now, I think I'd better stop here and explain the Passover. The Passover was when the children of Israel came out of Egypt in the book of Exodus. And the day before, the night before, they left Egypt and the Red Sea was parted and they crossed over the Jordan into the wilderness. The Passover was instituted. And it was the angel of death that was coming in to take all the firstborn of Egypt. And God instructed Israel, take a hyssop of lamb's blood and put it on the doorpost of the house. And when the angel comes into Egypt, he will bypass your house, and your firstborn will be spared, saved from death. During that night, the Passover being instituted, it was a meal, and the meal was lamb, bitter herbs, unleavened bread, and wine. And that's the Passover meal. That's the Passover meal that Jesus Christ is about to have with his 12 disciples. Verse 21. And as they were eating, and began to say to him one after another, Is it I, Lord? He answered, Oh, wait, sorry, I skipped over a section. So let me go back to verse 20 and run through it. When it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12, and as they were eating, he said, Truly I say to you, one of you will betray me. And they were very sorrowful and began to say to him one after another, Is it I, Lord? He answered, He who has dipped his hand in the dish with me will betray me. The Son of Man goes as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been better for that man if he had not been born. Judas, who would betray him, answered, Is it I, Rabbi? He said to him, You have said so. Now, Christ institutes the Lord's Supper in verse 26. Now, as they were eating, Jesus took bread and after blessing it, broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, Take, eat, this is my body. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, Drink of it, all of you. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. Now Jesus foretells Peter's denial. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, You will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. So that's a quote out of Psalm 113 through 118. The footnote says hymn, perhaps the Hallel, or perhaps the last great Hallel psalm, Psalm 136. So we don't know. Hallel would be 113 to 118. The great Hallel would be Psalm 136. Now we have Jesus foretells Peter's denial. We'll go through that again. We're going into that again. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. Then Jesus said to them, You will all fall away because of me this night, for it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I am raised up, talking about his resurrection, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter answered him. Oh, here comes Peter. Now, Peter is impulsive. That's one thing we learn about Peter in the scriptures. He's pretty impulsive. Though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away. Uh, Maybe that's where the phrase never say never came from, because of this statement by Peter. Um, Folks, we cannot ever say something like that because knowing ourselves, we are prone to falling away because of our human nature. Jesus said to him, Truly I tell you this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, Even if I must die with you, I will not deny you. And all the disciples said the same. So they followed Peter in saying that. Peter's the one who initiated it. I'm sure this was a deep emotional response by Peter. Peter loved the Lord. He did not want this to happen to the Lord. We're not going to allow this to happen. So Peter's in his flesh right now, not in the spirit. And his flesh is saying, I am going to defend the Lord from this happening. Do my dead body will this happen? That's the flesh talking, not comprehending the deeper understanding and knowledge of the Spirit. The next part is Jesus prays in Gethsemane. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." And talking with him, Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." And going a little further, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So could you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again, for the second time, he went away and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." And again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words again. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Sleep and take your rest later on. See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." This next part is betrayal and arrest of Jesus. While he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man, seize him." And he came up to Jesus at once and said, "Greetings, Rabbi." And he kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you came to do." Then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must be so?" At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day, I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has taken place that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples left him and fled. Let me go back for a moment. We got more to go, but let me go back for a moment where he talks about those who live by those who I'm going to get the exact quote, talking about the sword. Um, then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword." I think the old King James might say although those who live by the sword. I could be wrong. That might just be a saying, but I've read it many times in King James. But I know it was the sword that came out. So here's the point: they took the sword in the first century. It was called the rebellion of the Jews against the Roman Empire, and they died by the sword. I think this was a prediction by Christ here, telling them, don't join those that are going to be an insurrection against Rome. They're going to die. They're taking up the sword and they will die. Don't be a part of that. I think that's what he was telling his disciples here. All right. Matthew 26, verse 57, Jesus before Caiaphas in the council. Then those who had seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered. And Peter was following him at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and going inside, he sat with the guards to see the end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking false testimony against Jesus, that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last, two came forward and said, "This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days." And the high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you now?" I'm sorry, what is it that these men testify against you? But Jesus remained silent, and the high priest said to him, "I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Think about the timing here. He said they, during their lifetime, while they were still alive, would see this event. What event was that? That's not the final coming of Christ that Jesus is talking about here. That's yet to come in our future. His, what many call the second coming. I call it the final coming of Christ. No, he's talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, and that they would come under that judgment. That's what he's telling them. All right, verse 65. Then the high priest tore his robes and said, "He has uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spit in his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Christ. Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is it that struck you?" Now, so this part is Peter denies Jesus. Now, Peter was sitting outside in the courtroom, and a servant girl came up to him and said, "You also were with Jesus the Galilean." And he denied it before them all, saying, I do not know what you mean." And when he went out to the entrance, another servant girl saw him. And she said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." And again he denied it with an oath, "I do not know the man." After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, "Certainly, you too are one of them, for your accent betrays you." Then began Peter to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, "I do not know the man." And immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus before the rooster crows, "You will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. We are at 34 minutes, but we only have one more reading to do, so I'm going to continue on past my usual 30 minutes. And we'll go into 1 Corinthians and we'll do the reading. No, Galatians. We're starting in Galatians. Tell you what, I'm going to do an introduction to Galatians in the next reading, so I will isolate that one to itself. Thanks for watching. So remember, in the next video is going to be Galatians. God bless you guys. I'll see you next time here on the C Files, and please take care.